Hi, Michael. Thank you for being with us again. We have a question. A friend of the school tells us that she cannot contain her sexual desire, and even though she tries to realize Atma-vichara or surrender, her desire to satisfy her sexual desire is greater and more intense than her love for surrender or Atma-vichara. What would you suggest to her or to those people who are in the same situation?
Sexual desire is rooted in our Dehatma buddhi, that is our identification of ourself as a body. Whenever we rise as ego, we always experience ourself as a body. The body is either male or female, and generally speaking, if one identifies oneself as a male, one will feel attraction to a female, and if one identifies oneself as a female, one will experience attraction to a male. Of course, it's not as simple as that. Not everyone fits into this neat binary thing. There are in Sanskrit they talk of the Tritiya Prakriti, the third gender, and in Tamil there's the word Ali. That includes all people who are gay or lesbian, or who are people who don't fit neatly into one gender or the other, whether because of certain physical characteristics. There are some people who are physically a mixture of male and female, and some people it's at the mental level. So not everyone fits into this simple binary thing. But as a general rule, that if one experiences oneself as a male body, one is attracted to a female body. If one experiences oneself as a female body, one is attracted to a male body. Or even if one is gay or something, there's still that attraction is there. But the attraction, whatever type of sexual attraction we experience, it's all rooted in our experience, I am this body. Because so long as we experience this body as I, we will have that sexual attraction. There are some people who have very much less sexual desire. They say asexual, people who are free of sexual desire. But nobody's actually completely free of sexual desire. At times, there may be times in our life when our sexual desire is very strong. There may be times in our life when it seems to completely go into the background. We hardly think about it at all. So the variations are there, but the seed of sexual desire is there in all of us. Sometimes it manifests more strongly, sometimes less strongly. And we can never overcome this seed of sexual desire until, so long as we rise as ego, that is, so long as we identify ourselves as a body, we are always liable to fall a prey to this sexual desire. That is, the sexual desire is always waiting to rise its head. So it's something we have to live with. All of us have to live with it. How to cope with it best depends on, it varies from individual to individual. For certain people, living a celibate lifestyle, becoming a monk or a nun, or just without even becoming a monk or a nun, just choosing to be a celibate, that may be appropriate for some people. But for many people, if we try to live a celibate lifestyle while those desires are raging in us, by trying to forcibly refrain from fulfilling those desires, we can sometimes make them stronger. Conversely, sometimes indulging more in those desires can also strengthen them. So there's no simple rule, but yeah, I mean, there's no simple principle. But if you avoid fulfilling your sexual desire, the sexual desire will get less. Or if you satisfy it, it will get less. So we have to cope with it intelligently. One thing that is often said is that for those who have strong sexual desire, the best thing is to get married or to be in a in a loving relationship with another person. But that is true in a certain sense, but there's a one problem with that is, according to Bhagavan, whether we everything in our life is predetermined, it's predestined. So if it's our destiny to get married, we will get married. If it's not our destiny to get married, we won't get married. If it's our destiny to to be in a caring, affectionate relationship with another person, it will happen. If it's not destined, it won't happen. So simply saying to someone, "Oh, you should get married, or you should have a nice partner," and you're someone who's sexually compatible with you, that will solve the problem. It's not always it's not in our hands whether that happens or not. And also sometimes we can get married, and many marriages or many relationships don't work very well. The couple are incompatible. So there can be as much sexual frustration in a relationship as outside the relationship. So there is no simple answers. The only way to tackle it is not outwardly by okay, if it's beneficial for us to be in a loving, caring relationship, such a relationship will be given to us. But it doesn't happen all the time. It may happen for some time in our life, but not for all of our life. There can be so many variations. So how we have to deal with this is inwardly. As I say, trying to deny the sexual desire doesn't, it may work in some cases, but in most cases it doesn't work very well. So it's simply avoiding having a sexual relationship with anyone isn't necessarily going to solve the problem. So we have to, what our aim should be, we need to first accept the fact that sexual desire is something we have to live with. We can't be free of it just because we want to be free of it. It's something we've got to live with. We should try to avoid feeding it too much, but we should also avoid suppressing it, because then it can get stronger. So we have to deal with it in an appropriate way. As far as possible, we should try to avoid dwelling on thoughts of sex too much, because the real problem is in the mind, not in the action. I believe Bhagavan once said, it is recorded, I think Chadwick or someone recorded, but Bhagavan once said to someone, it's better to do it than to think about it. Because sometimes if you're always thinking about it, the desire is getting stronger and stronger. Whereas if you do it, then you find out that it's not such a big deal after all. So we, as far as possible, we should avoid letting our mind dwell too much on it. We can. And another thing about sexual desire, many people feel that they have very strong sexual desire, but however strong our sexual desire is, that desire isn't raging in us all the time. Sometimes it pops its head up, but most of the day we're not thinking about sex. We've got so many other preoccupations. We've got work to do. We've got responsibilities. We've got family to look after. We've got so many responsibilities. So it's only a relatively small part of our life is spent engaging in sexual activity or thinking about sex. Most of the time our mind is on other things. So if we are much troubled by thoughts of sexual desire, it can be, one way of dealing with them is trying to distract our mind away by thinking, for example, of Bhagavan's teachings and everything. And trying to understand that this, also discriminating. Though the desire for sex is very strong for most of us, the desire is actually far greater than the pleasure that we derive from sex. Whatever pleasure we derive from sex is because the desire is satisfied, but the desire is actually greater than the satisfaction that we get from it. So discriminating, but it's really not such a it's not all that it seems to be. I mean, sexual desire is, in a way, it's a form of Maya, so it seems far more appealing than it actually is worthy of. So we can discriminate, but really this is not such a big thing. Though it looms large in our mind, it's not really all that it's made out to be. We can discriminate, we can try and divert our mind away. And if we find we're troubled too much by sexual desire, we can also pray. Bhagavan, in one of the verses of, I think, verse 6 of Aruṇācala Navamaṇimālai, what Bhagavan says in this verse 6 is, Kamari Endruni Ambaral Endrume Garatita Paduhindrai. That is, you are always praised by your devotees as Kamari. Kamari means the destroyer of lust. Kama means desire in general, but specifically it means sexual desire, lust. So, and Kamari means the destroyer of karma. So Aruṇācala is praised by devotees as the destroyer of karma. So Bhagavan says about that, yes, yes, may, it's true. Unuku idu ama endru ayorum. Yet the doubt rises whether this name is befitting to you, Aruṇācala. If it is befitting, how can Anganan means is another name of karma, of lust, the bodiless one. Because karma is desire is portrayed as a god who is bodiless, who just who gets into us and overtakes us without our being even that he's invisible. So though Anganan, that karma is a brave and is brave and valiant. How can he enter the mind of those who take refuge in the fort of your feet, you who are Kamari? So Bhagavan has given us here a prayer for those of us who are or for times in our life when we're much troubled by sexual desire. Why is Aruṇācala called Kamari? Aruṇācala is our own real nature. If we know ourselves as we actually are, lust will be, we will no longer take ourselves to be a body, so we will no longer experience lust. But so long as we experience ourselves as a body, the lust is there in at least seed form. So to overcome it, we need to turn within and investigate ourselves. That is taking refuge in the feet of Aruṇācala. Bhagavan expresses it metaphorically in a poetic language. So if we want to take refuge in Aruṇācala, we do so by turning our attention within. So the most effective way to overcome sexual desire is to persistently turn our attention within. That is, however strong our sexual desire is, who is it who is experiencing this sexual desire? I am. So who is this I? So turning our attention back within, that is the most effective way to overcome lust. But it can be a slow process because we still have so many desires and attachments. We're unwilling to turn within. So sometimes when we feel completely helpless, unable to turn within, unable to overcome this desire, it's appropriate to pray for relief from this. Bhagavan has shown the way here. So Bhagavan was very well aware of the strength and power of this this of sexual desire. It's a problem for almost all people that face this problem in some form or other. So it's something we have to live with, and we have to learn how to cope with it in an intelligent way. We cannot totally free ourselves from sexual desire, but we have to manage it in a intelligent way, without overindulging, without over-denying, finding a via media as far as possible, and trying as much as possible to avoid allowing our mind to dwell on it too much. Okay, but those thoughts of sexual desire, they rise in the mind sometimes. We shouldn't feed them too much. We cannot avoid them entirely, but as far as possible, we should avoid feeding them. And that applies to all desires. I mean, the sexual desire is one that stands out for many of us, but it's any desire. We have to manage it intelligently and slowly wean ourselves off our desires. We cannot do so entirely so long as ego remains, but we can slowly reduce the strength of our desires by managing them wisely, intelligently, with discrimination, with viveka.
That was what I was going to ask you, Michael, because in a way, what is sexual desire any different from the desire of eating or even thinking or any other kind of desire that clouds our mind? Because in a way, it's like the sexual desire, maybe due to religion also, maybe we feel more like sinners.
Yeah.
Or, having this desire than any other desires that may be in our mind for very long, actually.
Yeah, religion complicates things and often gives people feelings of guilt which are not necessary. Essentially, sexual desire is no different to any other desire, but it is a bit more complicated because, for example, we all have desire for food. We all eat generally every day, and so long as we're getting sufficient food, there are some people who are very fond of very tasty food and they spend a lot of time thinking about food. But for most of us, there's desire for food is there, but we don't let that desire become too big a thing in our life. Some people for whom food is a very central part of their life, but for most of us, it's not. Okay, we need to eat, but we don't attach too much importance to that. Sexual desire tends to be, because it's not something, I don't know, but in some ways sexual desire seems to be particularly strong for many of us. And whereas hunger, the desire for food, we can usually satisfy just by eating a moderate-sized meal, then we're satisfied till the next meal. It's not a big issue for many of us. But sexual desire, the more you satisfy it, the more you want it. The less you satisfy it, the more you want it. It's a problem any which way. However you try to deal with it, it's a problem. But the other thing about sexual desire that distinguishes it from other desires, what is the original function of sexual desire? It is procreation. So when we engage in sex, there's always the possibility that a child will be born of that. So there are some people who are sexually promiscuous, but then if a child is born of a sexual relationship, then ideally both parents should share the responsibility of looking after that child. So that's one thing about sexual relationship. Another thing is sexual relationships are deeply emotional things. Okay, there are some people who just have casual sexual relationship without any love or affection there. But for many of us, sex is rather meaningless without love and affection. So when love and affection is there, it comes with certain obligations. We have certain obligations, and if two people are in a sexual relationship, they have certain expectations. There are some people who are happy to live in an open, what they call an open relationship, where they won't be jealous if their partner has a relationship with someone else along with it. But for most of us, we feel more comfortable in a committed relationship. And most people feel they have certain expectations of fidelity and in a sexual relationship. So it's very easy, if we are careless in how we fulfill our sexual desire, we can cause a lot of hurt to people. Firstly, we can, if we're in a loving relationship with someone, and then on the side we have a relationship with someone else, we can hurt the first person a lot. So, I mean, extramarital affairs often create a lot of heartbreak and often end in the breaking up of marriages. That's one thing. The other thing is, if a child is born, you have a commitment. I mean, it's a big commitment giving birth to a child, whether you're a father or a mother. Okay, often the burden falls on the mother more than the father, but it should ideally be an equal responsibility for both of them. And if you don't fulfill your obligations as a parent, you can cause a lot of hurt to a child. You can ruin a child's life. So there's so many complications to sexual relationships. This is why religions tend to lay down do's and don'ts. Marriage, there should be no marriage outside. Sorry, there should be no sexual relationship outside marriage, and but marriage is in the eyes of God. So if you once get married, you should never divorce. You should always remain together, which isn't always the best solution, because some marriages just don't work, and it's sometimes better for both if they separate. So there's no, religion tends to give very simplistic and often overly restrictive solutions, where there's no simple right and wrong in all these things. So we have to, if we do engage in sexual relationship with anyone, first it has to be a consensual relationship. We shouldn't exploit anyone. Secondly, we're taking on a certain commitment. If we have a sexual relationship with that person may have certain expectations of us. We have to be realistic. If they have certain expectations of us, are we ready to live up to those expectations? If we're not, then it's wrong to engage in that relationship, because we are acting in false pretenses. If you can, even in a seemingly loving relationship, you can be exploiting the other person. So there's so many ethical considerations that go along with sexual desire. And it's, as I say, it's also, have a sexual relationship with someone is it's very intimate, and it's a very, for many people, for most people, it's a deeply emotional relationship. So we have to be very sensitive to the feelings and the expectations and the hopes of whoever we are in a sexual relationship with. So it is more complicated than the simple desire for food or water or things like that. It's one of the most complicated desires, because it entails so much.
Yes, and yes, well, you said, there are many feelings involved. You can hurt people, and the other thing is about, because there is a difference. So there is some people might say, okay, having a loving relationship is very complicated. There are all these problems that come with emotions, with responsibility, and so on. So some people might just go to resort to porn or to masturbation, and that's it. And that's like getting the desire, you know, it's easier. And
Yes,
you can
but
get the desire finished. And so, is there any, ethically speaking or spiritually speaking, is there any difference the way you do it or the way you calm that desire?
yes. Well, the thing is, if by porn you mean just watching porn on the internet or something like that, I don't think anyone will find that entirely satisfying. I mean, people may resort to that because of the strength of the desire, but I don't think that it will be, for someone who tries to satisfy their sexual desire just by watching porn or something, I think they will experience a lot of frustration. Because why they find porn attractive? Because they want to actually engage in it. So it's not. Another thing, some men, to satisfy their desire, they go to prostitutes. It's more common. I mean, most prostitutes are women and it's men go. It can work the other way around, but generally speaking, it's women who sell the service and men who purchase the service. Again, it's not intrinsically unethical, but in practice, often prostitution involves exploitation. There are some people who may choose a profession of prostitution, but most people who end up as prostitutes, often they are people who have been exploited, who have no other means of earning a living. They may prefer to have a normal family life and everything, but because of poverty or other circumstances, they're forced into that relationship. That doesn't mean all prostitutes are, not all prostitutes are. I mean, there are some high-class call girls who choose that profession because it's can be a very lucrative profession. If you've got the beauty and the way of charming rich men, you can make a lot of money. So some people may choose such a profession, but many women who end up in prostitution, it's not necessarily their first choice. Another thing about it, a big problem is that prostitution in most countries is illegal, or there are legal restrictions on it, which is not actually necessarily a good thing, because where prostitution is illegal, prostitutes are far more liable to be exploited. So if prostitution is legal, they along with the legalization of prostitution also come legal protections for prostitutes. So making for religious or whatever reasons, moral reason, making prostitution illegal is actually to the disadvantage of prostitutes, generally speaking. So all these things are complicated. I mean, as far as ethics is concerned, if we are seeking to satisfy our sexual desire, we should do it in a way that will not harm others. So the principle of ahimsa, of non-harming, should be involved. If one chooses to go to a prostitute, for example, and if that prostitute is willingly following that profession because it's the profession of her choice, then there's no harm. But most people who go to prostitutes probably end up with prostitutes who are being exploited in one way or other. So that's not necessarily the best solution. In some societies, in Indian society, they had a regulated form of prostitution in the past. There were temple dancing girls, devadasis. They were said to be married to the god in the temple, but in fact, most of them had patrons, rich men, who would provide provide for their livelihood, and would basically, they would serve them as prostitutes. That was actually quite a good system, because it gave a certain social status to the prostitutes. They were servants of the temple, so they had a certain, they were honored, they were respected in society. It also was because there will always be men who go to seek sexual relationships on the side. It was satisfying a certain need that will always be there in a society. So it was actually quite a good system, but it was stamped out during the British time because of the British taught the Indian, or the British and generally the Europeans, because they came along with Christian missionaries who taught, oh, this is very unethical. And eventually they more or less stamped out that old system, which wasn't necessarily the best thing to do. So there's so many different, it depends on circumstances, it depends on so many things. Some people don't want to be in a committed relationship, but still they want to satisfy their sexual desire. So they have casual relationships. If one is having casual relationships with people, that is again fraught with difficulties. If a child is born unintentionally, then are you going to honor your commitments? Even in casual relationships, people get hurt a lot. People think the relationship is casual, but they become far more emotionally involved than they want to be. So there is no simple solution. There's no simple right or wrong. But that's it from the ethical point of view. From the ethical point of view, the only guideline is ahimsa. We shouldn't harm others. From a spiritual point of view, it's a bit more, it's not just a matter of not harming others. We shouldn't harm others. We also shouldn't harm ourselves. Feeding our sexual desire too much is distracting our mind away from the real purpose of our life, which is turning within to investigate ourselves and surrender ourselves. So in a way, for a spiritual aspirant, coping with sexual desire is an even greater challenge, because it's not just an ethical challenge, it's a spiritual challenge. How to wean the mind off this desire? What is the best way to do so? As I say, there's no simple answer. We have to use our discrimination. We have to find some way. And first and foremost, we have to accept the fact it's something we have to live with. There's no simple solution. But there may be times in our life when that desire seems to have completely receded into the background. I lived for 20 years in Tiruvannamalai, and all the time I was with Sadhu Om, and even for some years after that, somehow that thought about sex and such things, it just didn't come in my mind. I was living a celibate life, and I just didn't have thought of it. But at a certain point, suddenly those desires welled up from within. Why that is so, I have no idea. But so there may be times in our life when we feel, oh, I'm not troubled by such thoughts, and suddenly it will come upon us. So there's no simple answer to any questions regarding sexual desire, but we have to accept the fact that so long as we rise as ego, we identify ourselves as a body, and therefore we are always liable, even if we're not currently much troubled by such thoughts, we're always liable to be troubled by sexual desire. So we should never think we've conquered sexual desire. I think there's some story in the Puranas. At one point, Narada became very proud, thinking, I've conquered this sexual, I haven't had this desire for a long time. By the grace of Vishnu, I've conquered this desire, and now above all these things. And then just to teach him a lesson, Vishnu I can't remember exactly what the story was, but created some situation where he met a beautiful girl and they got married and everything. So none of it, even if we think, even if it seems to us that we're not much troubled by these thoughts, they may pop up at any time, and sometimes they may overwhelm us. So we can conquer lust only in one way, by eradicating ego. So long as ego is there, the potential for being troubled by sexual desire will always be there. And it doesn't even, some people think, oh, it troubles you when you're young, when you get older, it won't trouble you. Sexual desire remains, however, even when you're on your deathbed, it's there. So it's nothing to do with the strength of the body. It's to do with the strength of our desires. That is the problem. If desire would get weak with along with the body, then that would be fine, but it doesn't work that way.